Right, Tenet. Let's talk about it.
What the hell happened here?
Hasn't happened yet.
So it's been a long time coming, but we finally have gotten the release of Christopher Nolan's next film, Tenet, and this film has finally launched in UK cinemas and is just about come out in the US cinemas as well, and is sort of making its way out across the world. And Tenet was a film I was very much excited about. I'm a fan of Nolan. I've not seen every single one of Nolan's films, but from what I have seen of Nolan, I've pretty much liked to loved most of his movies, and this was probably my second most anticipated film of the year, just behind Denis Villeneuve's Dune, which we are getting the trailer for today. But I was very excited about Tenet, and the trailers got me very excited. Everything I was hearing about the movie, I was very, very excited about it. So going into it, I was hyped. I was pretty excited about it. So now that I've seen the film, and it's been a good week or so since I've seen it, I've had a lot of time to think about it and reflect on it. I've only seen it the one time, but I'm now here to do my review, and my thoughts are mixed, to say the least. Starting off with the positives though, I really like the performances here, especially John David Washington, who I loved in BlacKkKlansman. BlacKkKlansman was one of my favourite films of that year, so to see John David Washington get a lead role in a Nolan film, great stuff. And he was really good here. Super charismatic, really fun, great leading man. I've seen a lot of people trying to get him to play Bond now, which, I mean, sure, why not? But in Tenet, I was totally here for him. I thought he did a great job and was a great leading man. And he was, of course, supported by the wonderful Robert Pattinson, who was also fantastic in the film. Robert Pattinson just knocking it out of the park with fantastic performances, film after film right now. And Tenet is up there as well. His character was probably my favourite of the cast. I really enjoyed his banter with John David Washington's character, the protagonist. And I thought that he was just a really great addition. It was a nice little bounce off for John David Washington's character. Also, Elizabeth Debicki was really good in this movie. I really enjoyed what she did. And Kenneth Branagh, who delivers this deliciously evil and deliciously over-the-top character, which was also really fun to watch. And the action sequences were also top notch. I mean, Nolan always delivers fantastic action sequences in all of his films, whether you want to talk about the Dark Knight trilogy or Inception, or even to a more realistic level, Dunkirk. He does deliver really strong action sequences that get your heart racing and are really exciting, and Tenet is no exception. This film is really great with its action. It's exciting, it keeps you on the edge of your toes, it's fun to watch, it's insane to wrap your head around. It's just a really interesting film to look at, especially because this film does deal with the concept of inversion, with time moving backwards and time moving forwards. So it creates these really interesting looking action sequences that you are able to follow and able to look at, and just kind of keep your mind busy as you are able to watch these action sequences play out. Cinematography is also a really strong point here. We have Nolan working with Hoyte van Hoytema, and he does a really good job of capturing these shots, especially because, like I said, in a lot of the shots in this film, there are multiple things going on. Some people are moving forward, some people are moving backwards. So the way they capture that is really interesting, and you get to see that through the perspective of Hoyte van Hoytema, who of course is one of the finest cinematographers we have working today, and he does a really good job of capturing that theme and that concept really, really well. And the score was also a true standout here. Ludwig Göransson does the score, taking over from Hans Zimmer, and this was a fantastic score. Now I'm going to come back to the score because I do feel like this is actually a double-edged sword. The score is fantastic on its own. It's really good. Like, I remember hearing the trailer for the first time, like the first ever teaser they released for Tenet in IMAX screens, and I remember hearing that first piece of the score and getting so excited because I was sad that Hans Zimmer wasn't doing this, because of course Hans has have to go off to do Dune, so he wasn't able to compose for this movie, so I was kind of sad that he wasn't doing the film. But hearing Ludwig Göransson's score, who I really like Ludwig Göransson, you know, he did a really good job on Black Panther, he did a great job on The Mandalorian, so hearing him do a Christopher Nolan score and hearing this particular score, it just took my breath away. I was like, this is fantastic, it's so good. And in the movie, it's exactly the same. Like, the score is top notch, it's so well done, and it just is unique, it's interesting, it sounds different from anything you've heard before, and it fits the movie so well. Although, as I said, it is a bit of a double-edged sword, and this is going to link into my negatives, which is that the score, I do think, was a bit too overzealous. It was very much overbearing the movie. And while music is a very important component of a film and is really important with, you know, bringing out emotions in characters and bringing out emotions in audience, it just was a bit too much in this movie, especially because this film has a lot of problems in the sound department, which I'll get to. the score just didn't help that, and it was kind of just overbearing a lot of the scenes that it didn't need to, and there are a lot of scenes that the music was just taking away from the moment, and I didn't need that in this film. And unfortunately, the score, as great as it is in its own right, the way it's used in the film I think was a detriment to it. And I said the film has a lot of issues in the sound department, and that particularly relates to the sound mixing. The sound mixing in this movie is horrendous. It's so bad. It's honestly one of the worst mixed films I've heard in a long time. The way that this film is able to display its dialogue is horrible. It's just too loud, and it's done to a point where you cannot hear 90% of the dialogue in this movie. And it's frustrating because you're watching it and you're thinking, this is a film that I really have to pay attention to, and this is a film that I have to listen to every little detail and cling on to every last word. But it's kind of impossible to do that when you're watching this film, especially in IMAX. I don't know what the film is like in regular 2D, I watched it in IMAX, but in the IMAX screen, my word, it was just so poorly mixed, and it was so loud that it just didn't help. And like I say, with the loudness, with the mixing, with the music on top of that, it was just too much, and it just completely made the film, it got lost in translation, and you couldn't understand what's going on, you couldn't understand what was being said by the characters. And as I said, this is a film you want to pay attention to, and you want to be able to grasp every word, but you can't do that in Tenet. And there has been a lot of fears surrounding Christopher Nolan about whether or not he's just creating these complicated stories for the sake of doing it, and while I don't think he's done that up until this point, Tenet, I think, is the breaking point. Tenet, I think, is overly convoluted for the sake of being overly convoluted, while the story itself, if you actually lay it out, isn't that complicated at all, really. The way that the movie is told and the way that the story is told within the film is overly convoluted, and that's the issue. The story itself isn't actually that confusing, but the way the story is told is where it gets lost. And I think from moment to moment, going scene to scene, it can be hard to know what is exactly going on at that point and the reason why the characters are doing what they're doing. And given the fact that you can't hear the dialogue either, it just doesn't help the situation. So the film can come off as being confusing, and I walked out of the movie thinking to myself, I enjoyed that in a lot of aspects, but I didn't really get what was going on a lot of the time. Also, this film has really hollow characters. It's very cold and very withdrawn from the audience, which I found difficult because this film really needed some strong characters to get invested in, and unfortunately, the film doesn't have that. John David Washington's character doesn't even get a name. He's simply referred to as the protagonist, and that is all he is. And we don't learn anything about him, really. We don't learn anything about his backstory, where he comes from, who he is, and you don't learn that about really any of the characters outside of maybe Elizabeth Debicki's character, who is the only one who has a bit of warmth to her, which is why she's the character I gravitated towards the most out of everyone. And it's just frustrating because you want to get invested in these characters, and it's not like Nolan has this history of all these deep characters, because, you know, you look at a film like Inception, which is probably the closest you can look at when it comes to comparing it to Tenet. And even Inception, even though it has not the most deep of characters, at least the lead character of Cobb, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, at least you're able to get invested in him and his story because you know what he's fighting for. In John David Washington's character's case of the protagonist, it's just not that, and you don't really know why he's fighting until really the very end. So it's kind of frustrating to go through this entire film and then get this piece of information at the end, only to be like, oh well, it was saved for a twist, and I get that, but it just kind of takes away from the movie for me. And that's my problem. Overall, this film felt hollow, it felt cold, and I felt it was really difficult to actually get invested in this story and in these characters, and that was a problem for me. And even though I really enjoyed Tenet in a lot of ways, like I said, the action's spectacular, I enjoyed the performances, I think on a technical aspect, minus the sound mixing, it's pretty solid. And as an IMAX experience, the movie was unlike anything I've seen before. This is the way the movie utilizes the IMAX experience, and the movie really utilizes the speakers as well. This movie was definitely the loudest movie I've ever seen. It was kind of unlike anything I've ever seen before in IMAX, but unfortunately it was hard to actually enjoy the film on a full level because it was so hollow and it was so cold. The characters were so reserved and so withdrawn from the audience, and the story was told in such a convoluted way that it just made a story that isn't that confusing to begin with just lost in translation. And the sound mixing was the real icing on the cake of negativity, as it just took away any investment I had in the movie, as I just couldn't get a handle on what was being said. So overall, like I said, I'm very mixed on Tenet. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie in a lot of ways, but I also think it was a pretty bad movie in other ways. And even though, as I said, I've not seen every single Christopher Nolan film, out of the ones I have seen, Tenet is at the bottom of the list. So that said, I'm going to give Tenet a 3 out of 5. I think this movie does have a lot of good stuff going for it, and, you know, I think if you're able to watch the movie a couple of times, I think you might be able to get a better grasp on the film. Again, I've only seen it once, and obviously Christopher Nolan has got this thing that he brought in with this film where he said, don't try and understand it, just feel it. It's a line in the movie, and it's clearly addressed to the audience, but unfortunately, while I get what you're going for with that, it doesn't work for me. I don't really accept that as a get-out-of-jail-free card, and I feel like that this film, just being in the way that it is, just doesn't work in a storytelling perspective. And I think that this film has a real failure on its hands, as I've seen a lot of people say, well, you need to watch the film multiple times to really get it. But I feel like if your movie is so complicated to the point where you can't understand it on your first viewing, I think that that's a failure from the storytelling. And yes, of course, the more you watch a film, the more you can get out of it, and the more you can understand it, and the more you can look into it. But to purely understand the story at hand, if you can't get that on your first viewing, I think that's a problem from the movie and not the audience. And I very much respect Christopher Nolan for doing this film and having this big concept idea and really trusting the audience to, you know, keep up with it. But unfortunately, I think that this film failed from a storytelling perspective, from a character perspective. And even though the film is spectacular in a lot of ways, it's definitely a failure for me above all else. So have you guys seen Tenet? If you have, make sure to let me know all your thoughts about it in the comments down below. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about this one because, as I said, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I've seen a lot of mixed opinions online. I'm very mixed on it. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And as always, guys, if you want to see more movie reviews and movie-related videos just like this one, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.